and worked himself to the bone, and decided that that wasn't for him. He wanted to specialize and go and look at something else, and looked into, he's a trained hypnotherapist, he's a trained osteopath, a trained acupuncturist, and 15 years ago started a blog as an expert on how to get a better night's sleep. He also does one-to-one coaching on, techniques and top tips, and he's here today um, to give us an insight into the world of sleep. And he's a bit camera shy today. Dave, I think you're still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
We've had some technical issues with Dave's camera, but I hope everybody can hear him. So Dave, over to you. I'll put your presentation up.
Thanks, Lee. How are we doing?
This one. Can everybody see that?
I can't, Lee. There you go. I can't. There you go, guys. I'm a chronically bad sleeper. When you look at sleep, we inherit genes for sleep as much as we inherit genes for anything else. Mum is a rubbish sleeper. I was appalling at sleeping as a teenager. I was allowed to play in bands and really struggled to get a good night's sleep if I don't do what I'm about to tell you. The funny thing is, when you look at sleep, they will allow you to do a world record or a Guinness Book of Records jumping out of a plane at the edge of the atmosphere. Red Bull did it. They bust the sound barrier with their bodies, but they wouldn't let you do a Guinness Book of Records on lack of sleep. Why? Because it's bad for your mental health. So, I can say one thing. Here's the spoiler alert. Do not use your phone in bed. The one thing that I've found beyond anything else when I've done any of the presentations corporately is when I look at the 20% worst sleepers, they are all the 20% who literally will use their phone right up until the minute of trying to switch off. And it doesn't work, as you'll come to see in this presentation. Next slide, Lee. Thanks. So this is how we're splitting the presentation. A bit about the science, a bit about the tips, some practical ideas, and how to lock in some routines. Please do ask as we go along. It's a lot easier if you ask and interrupt than wait till the end, because I'll have forgotten what I said in some cases. But here we go. Thanks, Lee. Next slide. When you look at how we're controlled, the circadian component is how we regulate ourselves versus the planet. We have a chronometer, so do all animals. They link night and day, seasons are linked this way, and our body is synced into the planet. Prehistorically, human race was around the equator, roughly 12 hours day, 12 hours night. So it made sense to sort of sync us with the planet based on a hormone called melatonin that is registering lack of light. Homeostasis is something different. It's what your body does, how it balances all the hormones. Homeostatic control has checks and balances, and we have a metabolic meter that we'll talk about. So next slide, Lee. When it comes to circadian rhythm, we're tuned to day and night. We have a hormone called melatonin. It starts at 9 p.m., stops at 7 a.m. We have other hormones in the body like cortisol. We have a bigger ability to react mentally in the morning, bigger ability to react physically in the afternoon, and an odd thing that our highest body temperature is at 7 p.m. when it's getting dark, and our lowest is at 4:30 in the morning. That's important in terms of what it does for our circadian rhythm. Next chart. And when you look at what's doing all of this in terms of giving you the desire for sleep, it's melatonin. Unfortunately, it's blocked by the blue light from technology, which is what a lot of us will know, which is why we're using the blue light screens. It's worse if you are looking at blue light in a very, very, very dark room. So you may as well look at your phones in the bright light, because if you're not switching them to dimmers, you're still going to stop creating melatonin, which is the desire for sleep. It's also involved in puberty. We now know that teenage girls are getting puberty earlier because of looking at mobile phones. And the awakening part of our brain uses serotonin. Serotonin actually is very low in the morning, which is why anxiety, which is produced by lack of serotonin, tends to be worse first thing. Next chart, Lee. So that's how it works. it will give you the desire to sleep. It starts being produced in the evening, it peaks in the middle of the night, and is non-existent in the day. So if the animal, i.e. if us, aren't paying attention to it, it will just keep building and building and building. And it will try and knock you out in terms of giving you the desire for sleep. It's the thing that makes your eyelids close when you're on the couch at night and you haven't got into your bed and you've fallen asleep and napping. That's the thing that's making you do it. It's melatonin that's giving you the desire to nod off. Next chart. When you look at the other big hormone in terms of sleep-wake cycle, it's cortisol. It's an alert hormone. It's produced actually when we exercise. And it's really interesting. When you look at what it does, it peaks really, really quickly. When you add caffeine to this, you're just accelerating an already peaking alertness level. What I do in terms of a biohack now is I don't have my first cup of coffee until 10 to 11 o'clock in the morning. So if I'm using caffeine as something that's trying to make me more alert, more focused, no need to use it first thing. Wait until sort of middle of the morning. You're going to flatten that curve and you're going to give yourself more alertness for longer. And you can see cortisol virtually disappears into the night. We are not supposed to have cortisol in the middle of the night. We're not supposed to be stressed in the middle of the night because cortisol is actually a stress hormone. It's produced by the adrenal glands. Next chart. And when you look at putting this all together, the big cues for sleep are actually body temperature more than light. Prehistorically, as it got darker, the temperature of the planet would have reduced. It made no sense. If you're an animal and you're trying to limit the amount of energy you're burning, it would have made no sense for us to be outside as the planet was cooling. Not a point. And remember, we had this peak of body temperature at 7. What that creates is the opportunity for your body temperature, your core body temperature, to start to drop off. That's a bigger initiator of sleep than the lack of light. So what we found is when we've done tests on cave people, we've gone back to hunter-gatherers. We put Fitbits on hunter-gatherers in Africa. They actually didn't go to bed when it went dark. They were 1 or 2 hours later after dusk because they've got little oil burners. They went to bed when it got too cold. In the morning, they woke up due to vasoconstriction, i.e. when their body temperature got so low that they had to get up. Wasn't light, they were up before dawn. They were in bed after dawn. They were getting about 7 hours sleep, less than we need, presumably because they're processing less information at night. They're not as under the cosh as we are. Next chart. When you look at the other part of this chart, remember back at the start, we had this homeostasis. This is sleep pressure. Adenosine is produced from ATP. ATP is what the brain uses as energy. The brain doesn't have any energy stores. It needs a lot of power all day and all night. As you produce the toxin of energy production, it's called adenosine, gets logged in a receptor. This is the thing that caffeine is going to block. So you can't register awakeness when you're using caffeine. And once you get to having enough of it, it gives you sleep pressure. When you go to sleep, you remove adenosine from the receptors, so you leave them open to start that whole cycle over again. High levels when you've been awake for a long time, low levels when you've been asleep for a long time. And when you put them together, next chart, you get this thing called sleep need and sleep pressure, giving you that homeostatic window for sleep. Around about 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we're designed to sleep. That circadian rhythm goes on, and we nod off somewhere between those two times. Prehistorically, we'd have been wired to do that. Modern times, we're no different. We're actually wired to go to sleep somewhere around about that time. Next chart, Lee. Thank you. When you put them together, you can see where that sleep window is, somewhere around 10 o'clock at night. Ideally, if you're an average sleeper, you should be going to bed between 10 and 12 o'clock at night. If you miss that window, you don't get as good a night's sleep. We also have an opportunity in the middle of the day. The circadian rhythm creates this bubble or a siesta period. Prehistorically, we didn't use it as adults. No way would we have gone to sleep in the lunchtime if we'd already had enough sleep at night. But children, toddlers would use that period as their top-up sleep. So we're designed to use that when we're younger, but when we're older, very rarely did hunter-gatherers use that period because it was an opportunity to hunt. They probably wouldn't have wanted to crash out, because once they've got their animal, we're persistent hunters, so we're good at hunting through the day. We might have looked for the shade. The animals we were hunting, if we could get them back out of the shade, we're going to kill them easier. So no real reason why an adult would sleep that way, unless it's culturally driven. In Spain, in India, those sorts of countries, there's a reason for getting out the sun. It's too hot. Have a sleep. You'll need less sleep at night. But it's certainly not hardwired into our DNA. Culturally, it is. Next chart. When you look at those sleep preferences, some of us will be night owls, going to bed late. Some of us will be morning larks, going to bed early. That's dictated by your sleep preference. There's a great guy online called Michael Breus, Breus. He's got a sleep survey that is very, very clever in terms of isolating what type of sleeper you are. And if you sleep in line with your sleep preferences, you get a better night's sleep in both longevity and quality. What we think is that prehistorically, the tribe would be safer if different people went to sleep and woke up at different times, by about a third. So if you split the wake and sleep time, you can create a third more safety because people are awake and alert. Next chart. So when it comes to how much sleep you need, average 7 to 9 hours. Some people have genes that allow themselves to sleep less, but most of us would need somewhere around about that. Newborns, a lot more sleep, and the type of sleep we get when we're newborn is different. Thanks, Lee. Next one's good. So when you look at the next chart, it's funny enough that when you look at well-being, this was done by Gallup way back. When you look at well-being, we are happier if we sleep 8 hours than if we sleep 6. Which is good news, really, because we're recommending that you need somewhere around there, and you're going to be happy if you do that as well. That was a satisfaction survey on stress. We're better off if we don't sleep 9 and 10 hours. Why? Because if you're sleeping that long, you're probably depressed and you're probably something going wrong. So we don't need 10 hours sleep. We need somewhere between 7 and 9 to rejuvenate the body and the brain. Next chart. When you look at how we sleep, I don't know if anybody's got these biohackers or the Fitbits or all the trackers. They will track stages of sleep and they will tell you how well you're doing. Typically on deep sleep and REM sleep, they don't tend to bother with light sleep. They'll tell you how much you're interrupting your sleep, and they will hopefully push us in the direction of getting more of the deep and the rapid eye movement, because that's when all the sexy bits go on. It's not to mean that you don't need light sleep. It's the first part of sleep processing of information, but we tend to get that as the sort of bits that are left from the other two. It seems that if we get more, the body is trying to give us as much deep and REM as it can, and then the light sleep is what you get as a sort of debris. Deep sleep we get first. We get that before we go into REM sleep. So we go around in cycles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then REM. You go around different cycles at night. They last about 90 minutes, although they can vary. So the growth hormone comes in, it restores your body, you detoxify the body, and you grow your immune system. Then rapid eye movement is really about creativity. It's about how we restore the mind. It's about complex learning tasks. Children need a shed load of this. Babies have 50% of their sleep as REM. We have between 20 and 25%. Brain growth, cognitive processes are all to do with REM. Next chart. And the thing is that not all sleep is equal. When you look at the front loading of sleep, deep wave sleep, the deepest sleep that gives you the hormones that enable you to physically function are processed first. Then you get your restoration of the brain. Now, presumably, hunter-gatherers needed to be able to move, so that made sense. If they're going to be short slept, if you like, they could still function physically. The mental part of it tends to be restored later in the evening. So if you're cutting short of sleep, you probably, after 6 hours, have got all your deep sleep, and it's the REM sleep. It's the brain mental functions that you're going to short circuit. Next chart. So what also happens is you can see as you get older, as you get to my age, thank God the camera's not on there, Lee. Once you get to my age, you ain't going to get much deep sleep. And there's a constant battle once you get to my age. How on earth do you get more deep sleep? It's about exercise more than anything else. Physically, people like Federer, Nadal, all the elite sports people get far more deep sleep because if you remember, it's restoring the body. So if you give it the need to restore more, you'll get more deep sleep. And as a result, you'll get more detoxification. We now know that lack of detoxification of the brain, i.e. lack of deep sleep, equates to Alzheimer's and dementia, sadly. Next chart. So when you look at what it will do, there's a book by Matthew Walker. It will give you all of this chapter and verse. It's not good news. Prehistorically, we put sleep first, wake second. If you look at the lifestyle of the hunter-gatherers, they didn't deprive themselves of sleep. So, you know, what happens is your cognitive functions go, your muscles go. For example, if you are underslept and you are trying to lose weight and exercise, as you exercise, you'll take the energy out of the muscle, not your fat store, because your body thinks you're in crisis if you're underslept. Similarly, if you're underslept, your heart rate will go up and your gut immune system gets wiped out, which is really important with regards to mental health, as we'll touch on in a minute. Next chart. Immune system repaired through sleep. Night shifts are now regarded as a cancer risk because we wipe out natural killer cells. On point 3, natural killer cells remove cancer. 40% of them are lost in one night of bad sleep. Antibodies, definitely, we get a better reaction to a vaccine if we slept the night before, to the degree of 50% of 8 hours versus 6. So we know that from flu vaccination studies and from other hepatitis studies. And your inflammatory cytokines are produced at night. So the body needs sleep. If you think about it, when you have if you're poor and if you're ill and you've got something, you will sleep longer. The body gives you what you need, which is longer sleep to help recover the immune system. Next chart. So when you look at it, the big thing that we were talking about is mental health. It goes down the pan if you don't get sleep. None of the processes are going to work. Your attention, your memory, your focus, your creativity, and your emotional stability go if you don't get sleep. Next chart. And here's why. What happens is your blood supply to the areas that we use for our concentration goes. So the frontal cortex, the ventral cortex are to do with focus and concentration. The posterior cingulate gland is to do with behavior changes. The thalamus regulates our responses to input. So our sensory perception, apart from nasal, go through the thalamus. So those regulatory parts of the brain, the bits that sort of give us our sort of thinking, if you like, get less glucose at night. We have no energy stores in the brain, so we're reliant on blood supply, we're reliant on glucose, and these places are not restored. Next chart. Now, what happens is your memory goes. So the first part of it is you can't remember what you did the day before. In fact, students who get less than 6 hours sleep lose 40% of what they've learned. We also know now that if you nap straight after learning something, you retain it quicker. So there's a biohack on short sleep. There's a biohack on, for whatever you do not try and go lack of sleep if you want to remember what you were doing. And the funny thing is, if you do look at what you do remember, you're going to remember the negative stuff more than the positive stuff. So we know that we become, if you've had a bad night's sleep, yesterday's going to be worse than it was. Not good news. And these aren't, you know, big shifts. Next chart. So this is all the doom and gloom. This is how you regulate your emotions. We do it through REM sleep. When we dream, we process the day. We physically remember stuff. We log it into the long-term and short-term memory. Emotionally, you'll process the emotions of that day through the type of dreams. So if you're having a good dream, you've had a good day. If you're having a bad dream, you're having a bad day. If you have a nightmare, you've had a even worse day. In fact, nightmares are sort of representing what we're frightened of in the world. So in Asia, they have nightmares about snakes, as they do in Africa. In the West, we have nightmares about our teeth falling out. They're not representative, obviously, of what's happening in the day, but the emotion that's being processed through the brain is accurate, i.e., I'm not having a good day, I'm not likely to have a nice night's sleep, in terms of the REM dreams. We have normal REM. You can see the nice blocks. You have split REM. You can see how fragmented it is. Go to the next chart. So you get outside of the wrong side of the bed. and you get stressed. Now, often if you've been sleep deprived for long enough, you don't know which it is. Is it the lack of sleep that causes you to feel stressed, or is it the stress that causes a lack of sleep? You start getting into this vicious circle. When I do a questionnaire, 60% of people who have a bad night's sleep, it's down to stress. When I do a questionnaire, 60% of people who wake up, it's stress. If you think about it, you get a broken night's sleep, particularly once you've had that deep sleep. It's possible to get a broken night's sleep after about 6 hours. So you go to bed at 10, 4 o'clock in the morning, you're wide awake, and you're thinking about the problem that you got to work. You haven't got enough sleep pressure to go back because you've wiped it out because the adenozine's now out of your brain. So what are you going to do? Are you going to try and get back to sleep, or are you going to have a go at thinking through the things that are causing you stress? It's a very difficult decision. As we'll come to later, there is some advice that goes with this, but certainly, you know, when you look at stress, it is linked. Next chart, sorry, Lee, that was good. And you slipped it. I'll keep going. You slip them in, I'll keep going. So what happens is you don't have a good time if you're stressed. I like this one when I'm presenting to parents. Look at the one in the middle. You are twice as likely to yell at your kids if you've had a bad night's sleep. The hours aren't that low. We're talking about 8 hours. None of us are getting 8 hours these days. So these are high bars, you know. And when you look at what else you do, you skip exercise. So you lack motivation. So the thing that you're going to do to help you get rid of stress, which is to exercise, you ain't going to do because you can't be bothered. They did a survey last week, and people's motivation goes. People are less likely to look at even having a healthy diet if they're underslept because they're just too tired. And that overwhelming part of it is, I feel stressed, I feel irritable, I feel angry, I have got no patience. And, you know, I can relate to that. You know, when I was losing sleep, when my daughter was sort of a young little toddler, it wasn't easy to maintain your temper. Next chart. And this is why, remember, we lack circulation to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is like the dampener on your amygdala. Your amygdala is your fight or flight system. All of your input goes through the amygdala first. It then registers the hypothalamus that then fires your fight or flight hormones. At the same time, it sends a signal to your logic centers to say, is this threat real? What do I do with it? Can you think this one through? Because the fight or flight system needs a dampener on it. When you're sleep deprived, the dampener isn't there. So you have got this sort of bucking horse without the rider on it. Next chart. So when it comes to it, you get a 50% increase in amygdala peak signal. You get 8 times as much activation, and you're angry. There's not a chance in the world that you are as emotionally competent with a good night's sleep as you are with a poor night's sleep as you are with a good one. There ain't a chance. Next chart. And you start to crave sugar. This one's interesting. Why would an animal crave sugar if it loses sleep? Presumably because the brain thinks you're in crisis. So what happens is ghrelin, which is the hormone that makes you feel hungry, increases. Leptin, which is the hormone that makes you feel full, decreases. And you look for hypercalorific food. You get the munchies. What's more is because you're awake, you've got more opportunity to eat. And it screws up your metabolism. Your insulin goes all over the place. So diabetes is related to lack of sleep. Next chart. And see, you got cortisol going up as well. So we could link obesity and lack of sleep if you wanted to. You could look at the changes of sleep through the decades, and certainly you can see a correlation. But it's what you do with the propensity, which is you hoover poor food. So societal weight gain is due to highly processed carb diets, but undoubtedly lack of sleep's in there as part of the driver. We don't exercise, we eat rubbish food, and we put on weight. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's in there somewhere. Next chart. When you look at it, what the problems that we've got is our physiology is ancient. There's one of my best phrases that I've ever heard was, we've got paleo emotions, ancient institutions in the UK, and godlike technology. And that's the biggest problem that we face, is how do I behave as my physiology when I've got a 24/7 access to the internet and I don't really want to switch off. I'd rather be active if I could be, but I can't. I need to do this thing. It's called sleep. And it's probably the most rejuvenating part of any pill I could ever take. So when you look at the way I've done the slips, the sleep tips, we've got the physiology bit, we've got the hunter-gatherer bit, we've got the lifestyle bit, and then we've got the how do we manipulate light bit. So we're trying to make all these tips go back to our base physiology. Next chart. When you look at it, that planet was going round at the same rate. We ain't changing the light. 2 minutes a day variation. So our sleep preferences, our sleep circadian rhythm is wired to a pretty consistent day and night. When we lose an hour's sleep, when the clocks change and we lose an hour's sleep, we have more heart attacks on that Monday than any other day, any other Monday. We have more road traffic accidents because we can't focus with one less hour sleep. The same happens when you bounce your sleep around. So if you have a Monday to Friday schedule and then a Saturday, Sunday schedule that's different, you create this thing called jet lag, social jet lag, because you're bouncing your body clock around. Ideally, keep the same bed and wake time. No, we can't. We don't do that, but ideally at least anchor one of them. So maybe if you can anchor your wake time and then catch up with a nap rather than overstay your welcome in bed. This is the reason why, next chart, you get massively increased consistency, leads to massively increased duration. The better you are at staying asleep at the same time, the more sleep you're going to get. Next chart. And it's efficient. You go to sleep quicker, you have less broken sleep. Far better if you keep it consistent. Next chart. And you increase deep wave sleep, the bit that you get that restores the body. Next chart. And a massive amount of REM. That's huge. So what's happening is you're getting a big bonus of extra sleep, and that converts to dream sleep. So it's a combination of the quality and quantity that then gives you this massive increase. 30 minutes variation is huge. That's an extra 30 minutes of the stuff that's going to make your brain feel healthy. Next chart. We wouldn't have focused on daylight as much 20, 30 years ago. We'd have been more worried about blue light at night. But what we do know now is that the control of your circadian rhythm is dependent on bright days and dark nights. Prehistorically, we would have been out in the sun. We'd have had a massive amount of daylight next to the equator. And that wake up from cortisol is boosted by bright light. Next chart. And when you look at it, the top left hand is the bright daylight. Incandescent light's got nowhere near as much. The blue light bulb, you know, our light bulbs don't have it. Halogen doesn't have it. Fluorescent lights have a little bit, but you're looking at trying to get daylight into your eyes. You can't do it indoors. You got to go outside at some point. Doesn't have to be first thing, but at some point your brain wants this. Next chart. And when you look at it, there's a comparison. We need 1,000 lux for 30 minutes. You can get it on an overcast day. You can't really get it in offices, even if you sit by the window. And look at how much light we would have got, 10,000 lux by just being outside. It's massive in terms of what our brains would have been exposed to. And that strengthens your rhythm. If you do this in the day, you can get exposed to more blue light at night. There's a bonus to it. Next chart. And when you look at it, we'd all probably would identify with this. Eat the Mediterranean diets, all the colours of the rainbow. Why? Gives you a range of nutrients, different minerals. Magnesium is probably the one that comes up most in conversations. Magnesium is a muscle relaxant, and it's used in melatonin production. So, you know, some people will say, you know, what do I eat? What do I eat? You eat all of that. Vitamin D, important. But in general, if you're eating a healthy diet, you should get all the vitamins and minerals you need. Next chart. But the thing that we struggle with is this. Prehistorically, we started off as apes. We became homins. Homins ate 200 grams of vegetation a day. That's a lot of vegetation. We eat 20 grams. 10 times as much vegetation is prebiotics. It's what your gut bacteria eat. Probiotics can be used as well. So things like kimchi, kefir, fermented foods, yogurt, and, you know, pickles, that sort of stuff. But what we're looking at is these bacteria produce metabolites. Next chart. And these metabolites have a massive effect on the brain. Every single part of your neural circuitry relies on something that comes from your gut. It's called the second brain. The vagus nerve that goes from the gut to the brain, 90% of its activity goes to the brain, not from it. And the gut bacteria, funnily enough, go in 90-minute sleep cycles, as do we. They sleep with us. And when you have jet lag, when you knock them out of sync, they become diabetic rather than healthy. They are quite easy to knock out. One of the easiest ways of me to getting somebody who's been abroad, as we'll come on later, to sync in with the planet, apart from giving them melatonin, the other choice would be gut bacteria. Next chart. Here's the two that we most know about, Lactobacillus and bifidus. Those are the ones that you could get that you put in the fridge. And they produce GABA. GABA is a calming neurotransmitter. It helps you sleep. We used to be able to buy GABA. I think it's just been removed from the shelves in the UK. But when you lack sleep, your bad bacteria take over from the good. Next chart. Most of us would regard ourselves as needing to drink water. Why? Because we don't eat as much fruit and veg as we would have done prehistorically. Prehistorically, there's no real evidence that hunter-gatherers would have looked for water unless they were absolutely needing it. You know, they would pick it up when they needed it. They wouldn't when they wouldn't. But certainly we know that we need it because we're not having the same fruit and veg. Boundaries around caffeine. Why? Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. So if you've had a mug of coffee at 4 in the afternoon, half a mug still working at 10. Myself, I can't drink coffee past 12. Alcohol too, need boundaries around, because when you metabolize it later in the evening, once you've drunk it, it then disrupts sleep, REM sleep in particular. Next chart. Exercise is a no-brainer. When you look at what it gives you, it's phenomenal in terms of it's another super bonus for the body. 20 minutes walking 3 times a week is proven to help sleep. So it would be good to do it outside. Next chart. And here's why. Sleep guarantees a better brain. Exercise guarantees stress reduction and feel-good factors. It produces serotonin, it produces endorphins, it produces dopamine, and it burns off adrenaline. It's a super thing to eat, to have if you think you're going to cope with stress. Exercise always is going to help you. If you've got anxiety, it will always be the thing that the doctor will tell you first is go out and exercise. Next chart. This one probably is the reason that we're having a conversation in the first place. Very few of us will put a 2-hour boundary around tech. I don't know anybody who does it. I don't. I'll do an hour, but I ain't going to do 2. Why not? I got my blue lights on. I'm not on social media. I'm not doing anything that's really getting my brain buzzing. I'll be writing a blog or 2 or an email or 2, but I'm not engaging it in a way that's the problem. And the engaging it in the way that's a problem is when we get active on social media, when we're having an interaction that's winding us up. But certainly an hour before bed tends to be what people will do. Next chart. One of the problems that we've talked about, blue light. We can put blue light dimmers on our kit, which we should do, including on the phones. You need, it's called flux when you put it on your computers. You can see that the sunset would have very little blue light. Blue light's the one that we want in the morning. This is the light that blocks melatonin. See how the LEDs have a big spike? You need to kill them. You shouldn't be using any tech without the filters on it. And put filters on your computer screens too, or wear blue light blocking glasses. But certainly you put yourself in exposure to blue light, it will wipe out your melatonin. Sets it back by about 2 hours. Big change. Next chart. And create a consistent routine. Pavlov was a Russian scientist. He fed dogs and rang a bell at the same time. He conditioned them to expect food at the sound of a bell. He could then get them to salivate when there was no food around. So when he rang a bell, he could make the dogs salivate, thinking they were going to get food, but there wasn't. Your brain will think that you're going to sleep when you do the same thing. every night. So if I was to say 1, 2, 3, you'll say 4. If I was to say A, B, C, you'll say D. Your brain will do the same with sleep. That's why we train babies with a consistent schedule. We know what to do with the baby, but somehow we throw the bath out with the baby out with the bath water, or whatever it's called. We stop doing it ourselves because we find it too hard to create consistency because we want to be on the internet. Next charge. And this is what you should be doing. Really? That's the most pastime in the UK. More people do that than have a cuddle. It is now the favorite pastime in bed to be on your mobile phone. It should be cool, 65 degrees. It should definitely be dark, and it shouldn't have this in there. Next chart. And the reason why is that when you are on tech, you're psychologically attached. So when you come off it, you get this sort of anxiety, this fear of missing out. Also, you're going to be on it longer than you wished you were. None of us tend to get off, even if you set an alarm. The psychological stress was tested by Tel Aviv University. What they did was that they asked people to use apps in bed, and they tested it versus people who didn't. The ones that used apps were 60% more likely to grind their teeth. And when they asked why, they said because of fear of missing out. They're still attached to the technology, even though they're off. Next chart. And one of the other biohacks that's quite unusual is to tape your mouth up so you breathe through your nose. When you increase your oxygenation, your brain likes you very much. And if you can do that at night, you get a better night's sleep. To the degree of 20%, because it creates turbulence. When you take the air in through your nose, it creates turbulence. Next chart. And get out of bed if you can't sleep. Very few of us would know this as a sort of biohack, but there's no point in staying in bed if you ain't going to sleep. You know, a lot of people go, oh, I don't want to get up and wake my partner up. Tough shit, do it. Because you are now associating your bed with awake. You're giving yourself, you're better off sleeping in separate beds and then getting up. If you know that you're going to wake up, get out of bed, start again. If you know you're going to not get to sleep, why bother? Go and do something useful. If you think you've got a chance of going to sleep, get in a dark room, do something soporific, read a boring book, have a warm drink. Milk and honey works because it produces tryptophan, which is a precursor of serotonin, which is a precursor of melatonin. But something that is soporific. So watch a boring program rather than, you know, doing something that's going to stimulate you if you think you're going to get back to sleep. Next chart. So here's some practical ideas. Ideally, it's about relearning the art of switching off. Meditation, yes, there's tons of them out there. Breathing techniques, yes. And there's lots of ways of doing this thing called non-sleep deep rest. Non-sleep deep rest is effectively getting your brain closer to deep sleep. The brainwave, the delta brainwave of deep sleep is created through meditation. You can get it very, very close. Next chart. And when you look at what we're doing, you're taking the sympathetic fight or flight system and trying to get it to switch into parasympathetic rest and digest. You can do it through your breathing rate. So if you decrease your breathing rate, you are reducing your sympathetic drive. If you increase your thinking and take control of your thoughts, you're increasing your parasympathetic drive. So you can alter stress by breathing and thinking differently. Next chart. So meditation tapes, they're all out there, you know, calm and that. Listening to sounds, some of us use things called binaural beats that feed different sounds into the brain and create a brain wave. You can use white noise or you can use yoga nidra. Anything that works for you is what to use. And no one person likes the same stuff. Next chart. This is a simple one. It's called box breathing. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. Takes about a minute to go through this. I used to use it when my boss was shouting at me. He was a big, you know, back in the advertising days, the deadlines were on. Used to think, oh my God, I'm going to be here till 8 o'clock at night. Go out the door, use this, calm down, think it through. It's a great way of reducing cortisol. Next chart. This is a technique that's designed for sleep. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. use your tongue on the top of your palate. It's called 478 breathing. These are all on the internet. Next chart. And I think Lee will be able to send you decks. Progressive muscle relaxation, very similar to the military technique. So what you're doing is you're breathing in, squeezing, breathing out, and letting go. Very hard to sort of turn around to somebody and go, come on and relax. You're better off relaxing after you've really tightened yourself up and then let go. You do that from the bottom to the top of the body, and then you go back over it. Next chart. So we've got some practical ideas given the work-life balance that you've got. Here's some tips for jet lag, napping, and first night effect. So tips for jet lag is to adjust your sleep pattern in advance. Set your watch to the new time zone as soon as you get on the plane. So if you know that you're going to have to be sleeping later when you get to your destination, try and go to bed later just before you go. If you're going to go to bed earlier, it's a little bit harder to do that, to go to bed earlier. It's harder than go to bed later. Then when you get on the plane, change your time. So you're now working to the new time. Keep hydrated. Try not to drink caffeine and alcohol because they'll knock your circadian rhythm out. Eat for the new time zone, not the one that you've got through, or not at all. You can drive your circadian rhythm through food and when you time food. And again, avoid sleeping at the wrong time. When you get to a new destination, you're better off caffeinating yourself and staying awake than you are napping in your old routine. Probiotics, they get your gut biome back on track. Melatonin is a great sleep aid, but try and adjust to the daylight as quickly as possible. So if you're thinking about it, try and use sunglasses at night if it's the wrong way around. Try and block out the light. Try and get into a room with blackout blinds. Try and make it the way that your brain needs it to be in terms of the new day and night, because light can drive your circadian rhythm by about an hour a day. Next chart. Learn to nap. Power naps, 20 minutes, great. An hour nap, not so great, because you'll come out with this grogginess called sleep inertia. A full cycle is about an hour and a half. 30 minutes, probably too long. We now know that the archetypal power nap would be 20 minutes. You take a bit of coffee, go for a nap, wake up after it. Next chart. And here's why, because when you look at the decrease in cognitive functioning, you can see after 60 minutes, you get this big decrease underneath the horizontal bar. 20 minutes, you get a big decrease, but you get the bonus of it. So yeah, if you want a 60-minute nap, you'll get a bonus from it, but you will have a high degree of this thing called sleep inertia because you're waking up from deep sleep after 60 minutes. That's the bit where you feel knocked out. So 10 to 20 minutes power nap, you'll rejuvenate your focus. Next chart. And it's almost impossible to sleep in a new room. This was a chart that was done on people sleeping in a new bedroom. You wake up more often, but here's why. Your left side of your brain stays awake, slightly on alert. So you see the noise in the left ear was waking people up more than the noise in the right ear. It takes 24 hours to come back to normal. So if you want to have no first night effect, you need to take something that is familiar with you. For babies and toddlers, it would be a sheet or a pillow or a cuddly toy. For us, I like to recommend lavender. Lavender is a soporific scent. If you use lavender at home and then take it to a new bedroom, you're more likely to dissipate the first night effect. Next chart. And this is where most people would start. Most people would start off with telling you what not to do. So when not to have coffee, when not to drink, when not to do your dinner. This is what I prefer. Next chart, Lee. Which is that sort of stuff. What should you be doing? Use blackout blinds, yes, because in the UK now we've got light leakage at 4 in the morning. Get sunlight first thing, ideally in the first 30 minutes, and eat a good breakfast. Those of us that do intermittent fasting tend not to eat breakfast, but certainly the idea of breakfast for a king exists. And in China, it would be keep your breakfast to yourself, have your lunch with your friend, and give your dinner to your enemy. So most cultures have something around eating to get your metabolism started. Snooze button is a waste of time. It just robs you of sleep. If you think about Pavlov and the dogs, he was given one sound to elicit one response. If you have two sounds, a snooze sound and a wake sound, that would make more sense. But one sound on your phone, your brain still is going to do the first night effect. It's going to be half awake, half asleep. So snooze button just rob you of sleep. I like doing visualizations. I picture the day that I'm going to have. I make it relaxing. I make it positive, and I tend to have a better day. And I exercise first thing, even though I know I'll put on more muscle if I exercise last thing. It's just more convenient. Dawn simulators are these things that mimic the sun coming up. First use of tech I don't use in bed. I wait until I've had my breakfast, or at least when I've had a cup of lemon and ginger, and I wait till I have my first cup of coffee. Next chart. I make sure I take breaks in the day. I don't want to get too stressed to be tired but wired. I stop caffeine. I have some outside light. I stretch, and I separate work from home. I tidy up, put it to bed, and there's no way that I would be sleeping and working, or leisure and working in the same environment. That's a big problem these days with those of us that homework. And what I do with students is to get them to create different textures, different looks, different feels for their bedroom. So make the bedroom a study room and then change it to be the sleep room. Schedule breaks, yes. Review your deadlines, yes. Texter's neck. As an osteopath, I treat twice as many necks as I do lower backs now. When I first started 25 years ago, it was twice as many lower backs to necks. And it is about looking at the phone. It's 60%. You've got 5 times the weight on your neck when you look down. 60 pounds of pressure on the neck when you look down to text. It's a big problem. Next chart. And finally, what would a sleep routine look like? It would be drawing a line through the evening and making sure that you are now prioritizing sleep. Taking a bath mimics that drop in temperature. So your body likes this core temperature dropping. That helps sleep. Stop using tech, definitely. Non-sleep deep rest, definitely. Both will help you, as so will a regular bedtime with no phone in bed. That's the spoiler. Definitely, you can do things like magnesium, valerian tea, GABA, and lavender. But you know from the chart that we presented, consistency is king. The more you go to sleep, wake up at the same time, the easier it is to not have to do any of this. But the biohack really is beware of your phone. It's a robber of sleep, without a shadow of a doubt. I wouldn't be having this presentation if mobile phones didn't exist, because we wouldn't have knocked another hour off sleep. I reckon, and we do know that children are sleeping 2 hours than they did 100 years ago. I reckon Edison and the light bulb knocked an hour off, and tech has done the other hour. Most people in their week of work are now sleeping 6 hours a day or 6 hours a night. Most of us would then try and catch up a little bit at the weekend, and 6 hours is on the cusp of certainly it will make you feel less happy than if you had 8, for sure. All the evidence is that if you can go to bed and wake up without an alarm, you're going to find that you're going to have a better life, and you'll live longer, 18 months longer. People who sleep 8 hours versus people who sleep 6 hours live 18 months longer. So thanks, Lee. I hope everybody's enjoyed that. Thanks for listening. Any questions? I put them to sleep.
I was just going to say, you said as part of the presentation, if you learn something new, you need to have a nap straight afterwards. So that's what I'm going to do straight after this, and make sure that all of that information goes in. Thank you, Dave. It was fascinating. I've got some people on the chat.
I got a quick question, if possible.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Dave. This is Constantino here. So most, if not all, the mobile phones today have that filter for blue light. Do you think that is somehow effective, so it can somehow mitigate this effect, or just does nothing?
Yeah, no. The blue light blocking is fine. It works for sure. Blue light glasses, blue light blocking. We are taking the blue light down to 0 for sure. But you've still got the attachment. We know particularly those of us that use mobile technology more than others, we tend to burn out our dopamine. You get dopamine exhaustion. So when you come off, you feel deflated and flat. We also know that the sort of propensity, once you, it's about intent. I think it's, if you go on to any piece of technology with the intent to use it, get off it, you're fine. But once you start drifting, once you start casually browsing, you're going to waste time and you're going to waste hours, and you'll end up with that fear of missing out that people were sort of looking at in Israel. So it's not, the blue light is only part of the problem, but certainly yes, blue light technology is blocked now by the dampeners for sure.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat as well if you don't want to speak. One thing I was going to ask Dave was, you said about changing the room and focus. You know, a lot of us that are working from home have our offices set up in our bedrooms, and you know, differentiating between that in terms of, you were talking about textures. Could you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah. If you change what you
obviously
wear,
better to have a different room, right? But
oh yeah. If you can work in a different space to what you're sleeping, fantastic. Change the colors of the bed, so you've got a different look. Change the colors in the room, for sure. Change props around you. Wear different clothes. So go into work in work clothes, then change the feel of what you've got. Finish, walk out. Don't finish work and go straight to bed. Finish, walk out, have a break, so that you've created a differential break. Do something very different before you go to bed. So don't carry on working right up to the deadline, but create a different environment in look and feel, even in temperature, so they feel like different rooms, and light it differently. Certainly reading in bed is no problem, Emily. If it's a book, not a problem. We tend to find that they're quite soporific. If it's a Kindle, you've got no problems. If it's a piece of technology with blue light, you would. Same as watching the TV. 20 years ago, we'd have said, don't watch the TV in bed. It's going to keep you awake. We now know, we've done tests on it. If it's a boring program, if it's a soap, and you're not engaged in the program as much as a sort of watching a documentary that's stimulating you, you'll be all right. But if you've got a stimulating program and you want to watch it and you want to watch the next part of it. So I sort of have a row with my daughter the other day when she came around. She's 19. And she said, come on, then let's watch. We downloaded something, so we wanted to watch it. And I'm going, hang on a minute. It's a 2-hour movie and you've got 45 minutes before bed. Well, we'll split the time. She knows we won't. She knows damn well that we're going to carry on watching it. The same with anybody. If you're watching something and you're putting on a movie that's going to be 3 hours, you know you're not going to get bed on time. Don't do it. Watch something that's boring instead, and watch the movie when you really have got 3 hours. But reading, yes, reading's no problem. And
I suppose the Netflix series where it always ends on a cliffhanger, and you I just watch another episode. And,
absolutely.
Then you end up staying up a lot later than you should.
Star Trek, but that's giving too much away. Like.
The other thing I've written down here that I was kind of taking notes as I was going through. How long, when you're traveling and you've got jet lag and you're dealing with jet lag, or you want to set a new sleep routine, how long generally does the makeup in your body take to learn that?
The baseline is only an hour, sadly.
Oh, really?
You can only easily adjust an hour. If you get the light right, you can speed it up.
Okay.
So you're better off shining bright light into your eyes to reset your body clock. We know, for example, if I want to pull my body clock forward, that bit in the night when your body gets to its lowest temperature, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, if I wake up and shine bright light into my eyes at that moment, my brain thinks that's dawn, so it will pull my body clock forward. So exposure to very bright light will drive your circadian rhythm faster than anything else. Eating or not eating will drive your circadian rhythm. So light and food can shift it, but the body clock will only easily move 1 hour. So if you're going on a trip to America, for example, and you're only going to go for 3 days, why bother changing? Try and schedule your meetings at times when you would have been awake in the UK. Try and get them to move into your time zone. Do 3 days, keep your sleep and wake cycle the same. There's no point if you're only going for 3 days trying to bounce into a different time zone to bounce back.
Anybody else? Anybody else got any questions?
Hi, it's Daniel here. Dave, I have a question. Regarding the sleeping patterns of the brain, are there any studies to see how the brain behaves if it's on ketones instead of normal glucose with different types of diets?
I haven't seen any. Good question. I might have a look at that.
Okay.
You'd imagine it would have been on alerts a little bit more, but I've not seen any studies on it.
Okay, thank you.
And the link, I suppose, again with the your brain being in a new room and having the alert on the left side, is that linked to also people that get up and walk around when they're in a new place, or is that something completely different? Sleepwalking.
No, we tend to be disturbed. If you think about a different environment, when we're prehistoric, we would have been on alert. We'd have been waiting to go to sleep. That's why anybody that goes to sleep within 30 seconds is not a great sleeper. They're sleep deprived. No animal is going to nod off in 30 seconds and be dead to the world, because it's not safe. When we go into a new room, when we're walking around, when we're anxious, it's because we don't feel centered and because our alert system's on. It's a protection. So with things like first night effect, I would always look at whether I can control the temperature in the room. I wouldn't go anywhere now when I couldn't control the temperature. I'd try and get a room way away from the corridors in terms of the lifts. I'd make it as quiet as I could, and I would make sure that I've taken something from home to make me feel like I'm in the same bed. Some of us take pillows. Some people will take pillows. If they're traveling in the same country, they'll take the pillow from home. That's a big advantage, because your head is where you feel the hardest thing. Most people would ask me what the best pillow is, not what the best mattress is.
Yeah.
So getting our neck posture right is because that's where we feel stress.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Oh, what's the best pillow now, people?
The best pillow depends on what your sleeping pattern is. You need to look at how you sleep. So, Sanika, for a side sleeper, a medium firm pillow is good. One of them. For a face down sleeper, you want a very small pillow, and for a back sleeper, you need a pillow under your neck, a pillow under your knees, and a pillow under your back. So you actually need 3 pillows to get the best posture out of it.
I think that's just got very expensive for everybody that was a back
Absolutely.
sleeper.
Small pillows or towels. Great.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And I think Federica, all the tips, and we've got the Dave, if you're happy for us to share the presentation and
please
send
do.
it through to people, we'll send that on to people to have a look at and digest all the information that we've just had.
If anybody needs half an hour free of charge if they've got a problem that this presentation doesn't solve, free of charge, Lee. I'll do a half an hour for anybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's so kind.
My pleasure.
Yeah, just get in contact with Vibes, and we can put you in contact. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Real pleasure. Real privilege.
Everybody go and have a nap. Take that information in, and we'll see you at the next Vibe speaker. Thanks,
Keep
Dave.
safe. Thanks, Geronimo. Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. Bye now.